Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be exploring this really interesting chapter called A Childhood Memory from the Vineyard with My Grandfather. And, at first glance, you might think, oh, this is just some, sentimental trip down memory lane. But trust me, it gets a lot deeper than that.
Yeah, the author's book is all about this exploration of consciousness.
Okay.
And this seemingly simple story ends up being like a key turning point in their journey.
Right. And it all starts in this peaceful vineyard, right? The author's helping their grandfather out. And then all of a sudden, bam, this incredibly loud buzzing insect shows up. And things get really interesting.
It's like the calm before the storm.
Exactly. And the author really paints such a vivid picture. You can practically hear that cicada buzzing. They even mentioned that cicadas can get up to like 120 decibels.
Wow, that's seriously loud.
Yeah, that's like standing next to a jackhammer.
Yeah,
But it's not just about the noise,
yeah,
right? The author connects this cicada to something much deeper.
exactly. It becomes this powerful metaphor for the constant noise of our own minds. That mental chatter we all experience.
Oh, I know that feeling all too well.
The author later defines consciousness as our awareness of these thoughts, feelings, and sensations. It's like the observer behind all that mental noise.
Okay, so the cicada is like a symbol for all the mental chatter going on in our heads. I can definitely relate to that sometimes my mind feels like a swarm of buzzing cicadas, but the author doesn't just leave us with this noisy metaphor, do they?
Not at all. What's so intriguing is that they actually use this childhood memory as a springboard to explore techniques for quieting that inner cicada. They're not just describing the problem, but offering potential solutions for finding inner peace.
So how does a peaceful vineyard and a buzzing bug lead to finding inner peace?
Yeah.
What kind of techniques are we talking about here?
Well, one technique the author describes is called labeling thoughts. It involves simply acknowledging each thought without judgment, almost like you're labeling items on a shelf. It creates some distance between you and all that mental chatter.
That's interesting. It's like you're observing your thoughts instead of getting swept away by them. But I'm curious, do you think everyone has a cicada memory from their childhood?
Yeah.
A moment that looking back seems to foreshadow their own inner struggles?
That's a great question, and I think the author would say yes, that we all have these seemingly insignificant moments from our past that hold profound meaning if we take the time to reflect on them.
So it's about looking back at our experiences with a fresh perspective. But let's get back to the author's journey. They have this noisy cicada representing mental chatter. What else happens in the chapter? How do they find peace in the midst of all that buzzing?
Well, the author describes how, as a child, their time in the vineyard, especially when the cicada wasn't buzzing, felt incredibly peaceful and quiet. They later come to realize that the sense of peace they experienced is actually a reflection of the inner peace they're seeking as an adult.
That makes sense. It's like they're searching for that same feeling of stillness they experienced as a child, but this time it's within themselves rather than in the external environment.
Exactly. The quiet vineyard becomes the symbol of the inner peace they're trying to achieve. And the author uses the contrast between the loud cicada and the peaceful silence of the vineyard to represent the internal struggle between mental chaos and inner quiet.
It's like they're saying that finding inner peace isn't about eliminating all thoughts altogether, but rather finding a way to exist peacefully alongside them.
I think that's a really insightful observation. It's about finding that stillness within, even amidst the inevitable noise of life in our own minds.
Okay, so we've got this childhood memory of a buzzing cicada that becomes a metaphor for mental chatter. And the quiet vineyard represents the inner peace the author is seeking. It's amazing how the author is able to take this simple experience and turn it into such a profound symbol for their inner journey.
And it's not just the vineyard and the cicada that play a role in the author's journey. They also briefly mention how their upbringing and family background shaped their curiosity and determination to explore these deeper questions about life and consciousness.
I remember the author mentioned their parents. They said their mother encouraged them to explore the world, while their father instilled in them a sense of hard work and perseverance.
It makes you wonder how those early influences might have subtly shaped the author's path. It's almost like those experiences were preparing them for this deep dive into their inner world.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
It highlights how our upbringing and early experiences can have such a profound impact on our intellectual and spiritual development. And in this case, it seems like those early influences played a key role in shaping the author's journey towards exploring their own consciousness.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that everything is connected: our past experiences, our family background, our internal struggles, and even seemingly insignificant moments like encountering a buzzing cicada in a vineyard. All of these things contribute to who we are and how we understand the world.
This deep dive is already giving me so much to think about. I'm starting to see how this seemingly simple chapter is actually laying the groundwork for a much larger exploration of the human experience.
Exactly, and we're just scratching the surface. There's so much more to uncover as we delve deeper into the author's journey. But let's take a quick break to give our listeners a moment to absorb all of this before we continue exploring this fascinating chapter.
Well, coming back, we were just talking about how the author sets up this, really fascinating contrast between the buzzing cicada and the peaceful vineyard. It's such a powerful image. It really gets you thinking about that inner peace we're all kind of searching for.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like this universal longing. But something that really stood out to me in this chapter was how the author talks about their physical health, like they mentioned neglecting their body for a while, and how that made them realize how important physical well-being is for, exploring your inner world.
Yeah, that's a really crucial point. It kind of highlights this interconnectedness between the mind and body. The author seems to suggest that taking care of our physical selves can actually really support our exploration of consciousness.
Hmm.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a holistic approach. It's not just about meditation or, specific techniques, but really about nurturing the whole self.
It reminds me of that old saying, a healthy mind and a healthy body.
Exactly. But getting back to the author's journey, they start to really explore this idea of quieting the inner cicada, right? What are some of the challenges they face along the way?
Well, the author is really honest about their own struggles with mental health. They talk about this period in their teenage years where they experienced really intense mental anguish. They felt overwhelmed by their thoughts and were really trying to escape that noise in their head.
That must have been incredibly difficult. It really makes, their later work on consciousness even more powerful, knowing that they face these challenges firsthand. They're not just speaking from an intellectual standpoint, but from a place of deep personal experience.
Absolutely. It adds this layer of authenticity to their writing. They're not offering some quick fix or a magic bullet, but a path that's been forged through their own struggles.
So they go through this period of intense mental anguish. Did they ever mention how they started to, find their way out of that darkness?
They did. They described this pivotal moment where they kind of spontaneously had this idea to just start observing their thoughts, and the author realized that by becoming aware of their thoughts, they could create a little bit of space between themselves and that mental chaos.
That's so fascinating. It's like they stumbled upon a basic mindfulness technique without even realizing it. Just by observing their thoughts, they were able to create a little breathing room.
Exactly. And it seems like this simple act of observation had a huge impact on their mental state. It's like they discovered this inner power to step back from that constant stream of thoughts and just watch them go by.
Okay, so observing their thoughts helped create some mental space. What happened next? Did the author talk about, other techniques for calming that inner cicada?
Yeah, they did. But what's really interesting is that before they delve into those techniques, they described this incredibly vivid and kind of disturbing dream they had.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting. Tell me more about this dream.
Well, the author dreams that their head is intensely itchy, and as they scratch it, flies start buzzing out of their head.
Whoa, that's a pretty intense image. I can see why they called it disturbing. It sounds like something out of a horror movie.
It's definitely a striking image, but what's fascinating is that despite the disturbing nature of the dream, the author wakes up feeling cleansed and renewed. They describe it as feeling reborn.
Wait, so even though the dream itself was unpleasant, it had a positive effect on them. That's pretty counterintuitive.
I know, right? It's almost as if the act of observing their thoughts, which they had just started doing, somehow triggered this release of negativity and mental noise that had been building up inside them. It's like their subconscious mind was working through things in this really symbolic way.
That's incredible. It makes you think about the power of our dreams and how even the disturbing ones can sometimes serve a purpose. But how does this dream tie back to the author's journey of quieting the mind?
Well, after this dream, the author continued going to those benches we talked about earlier, those places where they would sit and observe their thoughts. But this time they had this newfound awareness and they began to see their mind as a separate entity, almost like that buzzing cicada we discussed before.
Okay, so they're not just observing their thoughts anymore, but they're starting to see the mind itself as the source of all that mental chatter.
Exactly. It's a subtle but profound shift in perspective. They're starting to understand that they are not their thoughts, but rather the observer of their thoughts.
And this realization leads them to start exploring more techniques for calming that cicada of the inner world.
Precisely. They start experimenting with different ways to quiet their mind and reconnect with that sense of inner peace they experienced in the quiet vineyard as a child.
It sounds like they're finally starting to connect the dots between their childhood experiences, their mental health struggles, and this exploration of consciousness. They're weaving it all together.
And what's remarkable is that, the author doesn't present this journey as this straight line to enlightenment. They actually talk about experiencing a midlife crisis, where they felt lost and overwhelmed by the noise of their mind all over again.
Oh, that's right. I'd forgot about that part. So
hmm
even after all those breakthroughs and insights, they still hit roadblocks.
Exactly. It's a reminder that growth isn't always linear. We might experience setbacks and detours along the way, but the key is to keep learning and growing even when it's tough.
So how did the author navigate this midlife crisis? Did they manage to reconnect with that peace they had found earlier?
They did, but it wasn't easy. They describe it as this long and arduous process, but ultimately they rediscovered those techniques for quieting their mind and found their way back to a sense of inner peace.
I bet it was incredibly rewarding to rediscover those techniques and realize that they still worked even after all those years and challenges.
I imagine it was, and what's fascinating is that they describe this rediscovery as a kind of awakening, like they were being called back to this work on consciousness, to share their insights with the world.
It's like they were meant to go through those challenges, to experience those setbacks, so that they could offer a more relatable and authentic perspective to others. Their struggles became part of their message.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It's a reminder that our struggles can often become our greatest strengths, our most valuable lessons.
This deep dive is already so inspiring. It makes me want to revisit some of my own childhood memories and see what lessons they might hold for me now.
That's a wonderful idea. It's a reminder that we all have these hidden treasures within us waiting to be discovered if we take the time to look back with fresh eyes.
Okay, so we've got the author observing their thoughts, having that intense dream, realizing their mind is like a separate entity that they need to learn to quiet, and even experiencing a midlife crisis before rediscovering their path. It's amazing how much depth and complexity the author packs into this one chapter.
What's particularly striking is how they connect all of this back to the concept of consciousness. They seem to be suggesting that consciousness isn't just about thinking, but something more expansive, something that exists beyond the chatter of the mind.
I'm really starting to see how this seemingly simple childhood memory about a buzzing cicada is actually the starting point for this much larger exploration of the human experience.
Exactly. It's a reminder that profound insights can come from the most unexpected places. And in this case, it all started with a childhood memory from the vineyard.
And speaking of that vineyard, there's one part of this chapter that really caught my attention. It's where the author talks about spending time sitting on benches, observing their thoughts, and having these spontaneous conversations with strangers.
Ah, yes. Those bench encounters, they seem to have played a significant role in the author's journey.
It makes you wonder what those conversations were like and how they might have influenced the author's understanding of themselves and the world. They describe these conversations as almost otherworldly, as if something bigger was guiding the interactions.
What's fascinating is that the author felt this deep sense of connection and understanding with complete strangers during these encounters. It's as if these conversations were offering them this unique glimpse into the human condition, the shared experiences that connect us all.
It makes you wonder if those encounters were somehow preparing them for their later work on consciousness, like they were getting a crash course in human nature and the complexities of the human experience.
That's an interesting thought. Perhaps those conversations helped the author develop a deeper sense of empathy and a better understanding of the different ways people experience the world. It's like they were gathering these diverse perspectives that would later inform their writing.
I bet those experiences also helped them refine their ideas about how to quiet that inner cicada. After all, they were probably hearing all sorts of different perspectives and ways of looking at the world during those conversations.
That's a great point. Those conversations might have exposed the author to a wide range of coping mechanisms and strategies for managing those noisy thoughts. It was like a real-world laboratory for exploring the human mind.
Okay, so we've got these intriguing bench encounters that likely shaped the author's journey in subtle ways. And they've gone through this incredible transformation from struggling with mental anguish to rediscovering their techniques and feeling called to share their insights.
It's really remarkable how this one childhood memory has taken us on such a winding and insightful journey, but we're not quite finished yet. Remember how the author mentioned the concept of complete trust in reality? It seems like this idea is central to their overall message.
You're right, I almost forgot about that. What do you think the author means by complete trust in reality? I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this one.
Well, it's definitely a concept that warrants further exploration, and it seems like the author will likely delve into it more deeply in later chapters. But from what we've gathered so far, it seems like this idea of complete trust is closely tied to their journey of quieting the mind and finding inner peace.
It's like they're suggesting that by learning to trust in the unfolding of life, we can release ourselves from the grip of our anxieties and fears.
Exactly. It's about surrendering to the present moment, accepting what is, and finding a sense of peace in the midst of uncertainty.
Wow, this deep dive is really making me think about things in a whole new way. I'm starting to see all these different threads, the childhood memory, the cicada metaphor, the quiet vineyard, the struggles, the techniques, and now this idea of complete trust, how they all weave together to create this tapestry of self-discovery and exploration.
And it's a tapestry that we're all invited to contribute to add our own threads of experience and insight. The author's journey is ultimately a reflection of the universal human experience, the search for meaning, the struggle with our inner world, and the longing for connection and peace.
This deep dive has been incredible. We've explored so much from the buzzing of cicadas to the quiet of a vineyard, from teenage angst to a midlife crisis, and now this intriguing concept of complete trust. I'm eager to see where this journey takes us next.
Me too. But for now, let's give our listeners a moment to reflect on everything we've discussed and absorb the richness of this single powerful chapter.
Welcome back. It's been quite a journey exploring this chapter so far, wouldn't you
Yeah.
say? From buzzing cicadas to quiet vineyards and teenage angst to a midlife crisis, the author really takes us on a ride.
Absolutely. It's amazing how they managed to connect all these seemingly random pieces, the personal stories, the scientific facts about cicadas, and the philosophical ideas about consciousness. It all comes together in this really captivating way.
I totally agree. It doesn't feel like you're reading a textbook,
Yeah.
It feels more like a conversation, like we're just sitting with the author as they share their personal journey of self-discovery.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so relatable and engaging for the reader. It's honest, it's real, and it keeps you hooked.
Right. And speaking of those unexpected twists and turns, we were talking about this idea of complete trust in reality before the break. It's a pretty big concept, and I'm really curious to hear more about how the author approaches it.
Well, the author doesn't give us a step-by-step guide to achieving complete trust in this chapter, at least not yet. It's more like they're just introducing this idea that'll probably become clearer as we go along.
It's like they're inviting us to think about it along with them,
Yeah.
to figure out what it might mean for us in our own lives. But based on what we've seen so far, it seems like this idea of trust is closely tied to quieting the mind and finding inner peace.
Exactly. It's like they're saying that if we learn to trust the process of life, if we let go of our need to control everything, then we can free ourselves from a lot of suffering.
It's about surrendering to what is, April, instead of fighting against it, a whole new way of dealing with challenges.
And that's such a powerful message, especially in today's world where we're constantly bombarded with information and pressure to do more and be more. This idea of complete trust offers a different way, a path of acceptance and letting go.
It makes you wonder if that's what the author ultimately learned through their own journey, that true peace comes from letting go of control and trusting in something bigger than ourselves.
That's a beautiful insight, and I think it gets to the heart of what the author's trying to say, that real happiness and peace aren't found in external things, but in our own internal state of being.
So this childhood memory with the buzzing cicada and the peaceful vineyard has taken us on a journey through the author's struggles, their insights, their methods for quieting the mind, and ultimately this profound idea of complete trust in reality. It's amazing how something so simple can lead to such deep explorations.
It really shows the power of reflection and introspection. It shows us that even the most ordinary experiences can have profound lessons if we take the time to really look deeper.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left feeling really inspired, like the author has given us a map, not just for calming our minds, but for living a more meaningful and fulfilling life.
And maybe by following in their footsteps, by exploring our own inner worlds and learning to trust the process of life, we can all find that peace and fulfillment we're looking for.
Well said. This deep dive has been incredible, and thank you all for joining us today as we explore this fascinating chapter. We've uncovered so much, and I hope this has inspired you to reflect on your own experiences and the lessons they hold. What seemingly ordinary memories from your own childhood might have a deeper meaning if you look back on them now. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.